The Halion Chronicles. The Protectorate of Hellas stands at the edge of war. Titans stir, and ancient machines whisper in the void. Beneath the crimson grays of Thanatos, fate is cast in steel and circuitry. The Olympians walk among the mortals, spinning their schemes. Myth do not endure, they break, they burn, they fall. Only those bold enough to defy fate may earn their place among legend. Your cybersaga journey continues now. Crimson Ascent. The city of Tuul, nestled within the unforgiving Shardlands, lay before Thrish, like an immense jagged maw carved from the rocky terrain. Above the rift, the sky wore the bruised palette of twilight, streaked with volcanic orange and ash black, as if painted by an unhinged artist. Thanatos' eerie red glow shimmered across the chasm below, casting long shadows over the crooked obelisks that punctuated the cliff's edges, mimicking fangs of stone and metal. Thrish perched at the edge of a crumbling butte, his wiry frame hunched, eyes glinting with cunning beneath his grey, damp fur. His nose twitched, and he snuffed the dusty air, tasting the scent of the leading caravan of the dead, ghostly remains of faithful or forsaken by the gods. The procession crept along the fog-filled rift, the shuffling figures pulling shattered sledges with piles of corpses. Their spectral shapes wavered like mirages in the heated air, warped as if seen through fractured glass. As they approached the stone bridge, the eerie whispers of lamentations of beggars along the way seeped into the cliffs like vapor. Waves of incense, myrrh, and sulfur permeated his pointy nose, offsetting his perceptions and dulling the sharpness of his senses. Each flaccid form that lay on the sledges of the caravan bore the remnants of their forgotten lives. Rusted daggers, tattered armor, hollowed eyes peering through the tatters of hooded cloaks. An obsidian dagger glinted in the pale light, its thin edge honed by eons of grief, flaked into almost oblivion. Thrish gazed upward from the stone bridge, his eyes tracing the steep ascent of the rift's walls, adorned with ancient metal beams and exposed tunnels. Above, the city of Tuul clung precariously to the cliff edge, its sandstone building and towering temple casting dark silhouettes against the crimson glow of Thanatos, with the temple's tongue-like balcony jutting ominously over the abyss. The dark chasm stretched infinitely, a void that swallowed the dim light of the bioluminescent fungi clinging to the jagged cliffs below. The eerie red glow of Thanatos painted the rugged rock face in hues of blood and shadow, ancient crumbling structures embedded within. A wind gust howled through the canyon, carrying tiny shards of obsidian and whispers of the lost souls. He watched as the first of the caravaneers crossed the rift's ancient stone bridge, their passage slow and deliberate, the sandstone rough cuts and crumbling edges ornating the sturdy and monumental pillars stretching down into the rift below. The narrow span swayed like a serpent's tongue in the wind, with their weighted steps bringing the stone to life in creaks and groans. Flickering phantoms slithered like oil over the bridge's edge, trailing into the chasm like ethereal tears. Thrish trudged along the narrow, winding path up the cliff, his wiry frame hunched against the weight of one of the sledges. The caravan of the dead moved slowly, the air filled with the haunting echoes of the solemn procession. Sledges piled high with corpses, and their meager belongings were hauled laboriously by teams of 4 or 8 caravaneers, their faces grim with the effort. The path was treacherous, broken, and makeshift repairs barely holding together, with titan beams and other ancient artifacts strewn about like the remnants of a forgotten age. The fog hung thick and heavy, mingling with the dusty air, reducing visibility to a few meters. Each step was a gamble, the ground uneven and prone to giving way without warning. Trish's sharp eyes scanned the path ahead, noting every crack and fissure, every loose rock that could spell disaster. Despite his vigilance, the ascent was fraught with peril. The cliff loomed on one side, an unyielding wall of jagged rock, while the other side dropped away into the abyss where the plutons roamed, their guttural snarls echoing from below. The caravan struggled onwards, the sledges creaking under their burdens. Thrish found himself helping a group wrestling with a particularly unwieldy sledge. Sweat matted his grey fur as he heaved alongside them, his muscles straining with the effort. The path narrowed further, and Trish's senses went on high alert. A sudden shift, and one of the sledges began to tilt precariously, threatening to topple over the edge. "Watch out!" Thrish yelled, his voice barely audible over the groaning of the sledge and the clatter of loose rocks. His reflexes kicked in, and he lunged forward, pushing a caravaneer back onto the path, just as the sledge tipped and tumbled with its human cargo into the darkness below. The abrupt movement sent a loose rock skittering under his foot, and before he could regain his balance, Thrish found himself slipping over the edge. Hot air rose from the abyss up, and he was about to become an early sacrifice. Thrish turned around, wrestling with the torque of his movement. As a slipping became a fall, he hammered his clawy hands into a metal beam sticking out of the stone, hoping it will not yield. For a terrifying moment he dangled in the reddish, dusty air, his wiry fingers clawing desperately at the beam of the cliff's edge. The abyss yawned below, a seemingly endless void that threatened to swallow him whole. His heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to hold on, his legs kicking futilely in the empty space. "Thrish!" a voice called out, cutting through the haze of panic. He looked up to see Sera-la, her thin, wiry frame silhouetted against the murky light. Her strong hands reached out, fingers wrapped in hornbull leather garments. Her face, framed by wild, dark fur, masked her inner terror with determination. "Hold on, I'm coming!" Sera-la's voice was steady, reassuring. She knelt at the edge, her grip firm as she clasped Thrish's wrists. Thrish got hold of her wrist, hanging with one hand for a moment. With a grunt of effort, she hauled him up, her muscles straining visibly beneath her leather garments. The scent of sweat and dust mingled in the air as she pulled him to safety. As Thrish lay on the path, catching his breath, he looked up at Sera-la. "You saved me," he panted, his voice rough. Sera-la smiled. "Again, yes. Couldn't let you fall, could I?" she said, her tone light, but her eyes serious. "Beside, we still have a long way to go." Thrish nodded, his heart still racing, but now for a different reason. He rose to his feet, brushing the dust from his leather cloak. "Thank you, Sera-la. I owe you one." She laughed softly and ironically, a musical sound that seems out of place in this harsh environment. "I carve one more on your dead bone," she replied laconic. "Just don't make a habit of it, Thrish." A moment of understanding passing between them, the bond of shared danger, the thrill of their survival in the Shardlands, and an unspoken connection that filled both their lives at the Yellowstone. The path ahead beckoned, and the caravan of the dead could not wait. Thrish now took the lead, his eyes scanning every turn, every crevice for signs of danger. The climb was arduous, each step a battle against the weight of the sledges, and the treacherous path. Hours passed, each one seeming longer than the last. But finally the plain of Tuul came into view. The town's outer walls loomed above, towering another 10 meters upward, a bastion of civilization in the wild Shardlands. In the distance, the gate of the skull beckoned, the entrance to Tuul. Its macabre ornaments, the bones and skulls of past sacrifices, stood as silent sentinels. The sight filled Thrish with a sense of grim determination. They had made it, against all odds. As the caravan approached the gate, the air seemed to lighten, the oppressive weight of the journey lifting slightly. "Almost there," Thrish murmured, glancing at Sera-la. She nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "Almost there," she echoed, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and something deeper. Thrish saw Sera-la as she looked up the walls of Tuul that rose high into the air as they led the caravan along the walls towards the skull gate. The high walls of Tuul, made from enormous metal scrap found in the vicinity, mingled by sandstorm and tortured by decades of shard storms, cradled their spirits in grim embrace. Silence. Only the howling of the wind passing through the twisted rocks dotting the plateau. The colossal gate in the distance stood ajar, guarded by obsidian statues carved with foreboding symbols, their faces twisted in grimaces of pain and longing. Bones, skulls, and other cayman remains engulfed the two gate towers. Fires burned in stone-carved braziers lining the wall, casting ghoulish shadows across the shattered pavements and the ever-present encampments of the various tribes visiting Tuul. Thrish's tail twitched, and his breath quickened with an electric anticipation. The caravan, drawn to Tuul's magnetic corruption of the soul and pitiful appeasers of the Pluton. The specters heralded forgotten secrets, artifacts waiting to be claimed. What lay down below, only the brave may imagine. Protocol aborted. Attempting reconfiguration. A calm voice sounded in his mind, seemingly coming from a distance. Yet none of his companions seemed to notice. Thank you for listening to the Halion Chronicles. You journeyed until the end and likely enjoyed your travels through this episode. Let us know with a like and share it with fellow travelers of Halion. Never miss an episode, subscribe and turn on the notification to stay ahead of the unfolding saga. For free additional content, lore deep dives and more stories from Halion, visit our Substack at halionchronicles.substack.com.